What do you know about the Ten Commandments? Are they still in effect today? Are they what we should follow in order to go to heaven? We'll be answering these and other questions concerning the Ten Commandments on today's program. Please stay tuned.
The Churches of Christ of the North Texas area present The Truth in Love.
How precious is the good divine, by inspiration give. Bright as the lamp its precept shine, to guide my soul to heaven. Holy book divine, precious treasure thou art thine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. It sweetly cheers my drooping heart in this dark vale of tears. Light to my life it still imparts, and quells my rising fears. Holy book divine, precious treasure thou art mine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. This lamp through all the tedious night of life shall guide my way, till I behold a clearer light of an eternal day. Holy book divine, precious treasure thou art thine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home. Holy book divine, precious treasure thou art thine. Lamp to my feet and a light to my way, to guide me safely home.
Good morning and welcome to The Truth in Love. I'm Leslie Parks, your host for today's program. I'm delighted to be able to take part in this wonderful telecast, and I'm excited that you have tuned in to be with us today. David Roper, who preaches for the Brown Trail Church of Christ in the greater Fort Worth area, will be the speaker for today's program. David is very instrumental in the production of this series. I really appreciate his efforts. Chances are you've heard him speak on The Truth in Love before, or maybe have seen him as a host, and you're looking forward to his message. He'll be with us in just a few minutes. But first, let me ask you to get a pencil and a piece of paper ready. Later on in the program, I'll be telling you about an upcoming series on the home and how you can get a free study booklet to go along with this series. Right now, though, let's listen to a song by the Fort Worth Christian Chorus. Then I'll be back with Mr. Roper.
The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld the glory of the Father. We beheld the glory of the Father, full of grace and truth. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. He came to His own, and His own received Him not. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld the glory of the Father. We beheld the glory of the Father.
I hope you enjoyed that song and that it has helped you to prepare for our study. Now, here's David Roper of the Brown Trail Church of Christ with his message on the Ten Commandments. David.
Thank you, Leslie. Leslie Parks does a lot of work behind the scenes on this program. Now, for just a moment, I want you to imagine yourself an Israelite who's just come out of Egyptian bondage under the leadership of Moses. You're standing before towering, thundering, quaking Mount Sinai, a vast granite altar rising abruptly to a height of 1,500 feet. A thick cloud is over the mountain, and out of the cloud comes thunder and lightning. The whole mountain is smoking like a furnace and quaking so fiercely you can barely keep your feet. And then, out of the darkness, comes the voice of God. I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Exodus chapter 20, verse 2 through 17. These words, later written down by Moses, constitute the best known law in all the world, the Ten Commandments. And yet, even though they are the best known laws in all the world, they're probably the least understood. For instance, many people fail to understand that they were given to the Jews only. When Moses gave the Ten Commandments for the second time in Deuteronomy 5, he emphasized that these laws were not made with their fathers or with anyone else. Notice verse 3 of Deuteronomy 5. The Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are all of us here alive this day. A covenant is an agreement between parties and affects no others. The Ten Commandments was an important part of the covenant between God and the Jews. And this covenant affects only those in Jewish household, and it affected no others. Also, few understand that the Ten Commandments were only a temporary law, which was to be done away. Notice Jeremiah, the 31st chapter, verse 31 and 32. Behold, the days will come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel, and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them, saith the Lord. Now the Ten Commandments were the core of the covenant with the Israelites when they came out of bondage. And the Lord says, I'm going to make a new covenant with the people, not according to that old covenant. Again, few understand that the Ten Commandments have been done away, invalidated, and no longer applied to us as a law. In 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter, verse 7 through 11, Paul contrasts the Old and the New Covenants. In verses 7 and 8 he writes, But if the ministration of death, written and engraven in stones, you see, disobedience to the Ten Commandments brought about spiritual death, if that which was written and engraven in stones was glorious, so the children of Israel could not steadfastly behold the face of Moses for the glory of his countenance, which glory was to be done away, how shall not the ministration of the Spirit be rather glorious? Now notice verse 11 of that same chapter. For if that which is done away, in other words, the Ten Commandments, that which was written on stones, was glorious, much more that which remaineth, the New Testament of Christ, is glorious. Paul says that which was written on stone, the Ten Commandments, has been done away, while the ministration of the Spirit, or the New Testament, still remains. And when did this Old Testament cease? As you notice in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, in Colossians 2:14, Paul said the old law was nailed to the cross. The death of Jesus marked the end of the Ten Commandments and related laws. On the other hand, in Hebrews the 9th chapter, verse 16 and 17, the writer said that the New Testament, or will of Christ, went into effect at His death, just as anyone's last will and testament goes into effect at his death. And thus the death of Christ on the cross marks the end of the Ten Commandments as a law and the beginning of the new dispensation. And finally, few people understand that we must keep certain basic commands not because they're in the Ten Commandments, but because they're in the New Testament of Christ. 9 of the original 10 Commandments in principle are restated in the New Testament. One of them is not. Those, however, that are repeated in the New Testament are not listed together as they were in the Old Testament, and they're simply a small part of the overall commands of Christ. Furthermore, each of the laws has been expanded to include a great deal more than it did in the Old Testament. In our lessons this morning and next Sunday morning, we want to take a closer look at the world-famous 10 Commandments, to especially see how Jesus applied 9 of them to us. I hope you'll be impressed with this thought. Today, one could keep the old 10 Commandments perfectly and still be lost. The 10 Commandments naturally divide themselves into 2 sections. The first 4 dealing with one's relationship with God, and then the last 6 dealing with one's relationship with his fellow man. The Jews summarized the 10 Commandments with these 2 laws. First of all, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, and mind. And secondly, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Matthew 22:36 through 39. Now the first of the commandments says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. This is the first commandment, not only in numerical sequence, but also in order of importance. If one did not obey this command, he would not and could not obey the others. It was a very important lesson for a nation that kept a golden calf up its sleeve. The key to this command is found in the words, before me. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. God had to be first in their affections and the only God they worship. This basic admonition has been repeated in the New Testament. When tempted by Satan, Jesus said, it is written, thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. Matthew 4 and verse 10. Someone has said, whatever thy hand clings to and relies upon, that is properly thy God. The thing that a person puts first in his life, that is his God. Now, here in America, we do not bow before giant birds of carved granite or wooden idols with stone eyes, but we still have other gods competing with Jehovah. We may never have bowed before a calf of gold, but we can still worship gold. We may never have bent the knee before a graven image of Baal, but there's also a graven image on a dollar bill. Can any of us say that at some time or another we have never put ambition, vanity, or self above the worship of God? There are many things that are good in this life, but they are not God. Today, this first commandment has a value for us, not because it's a part of the 10 Commandments, but because it is in principle repeated in the pages of the New Testament. Commandment number 2 was, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. The second commandment involved a 3-fold prohibition. Number 1, don't make an image. Number 2, don't bow down to an image. Number 3, don't serve an image. The making of images or idols could only result in 3 basic mistakes. First of all, it could only give a misrepresentation of God, because God is never posed for a sculptor or photographer. Secondly, it would give man the idea that God is like man, a concept that has produced great evil in the world. And thirdly, it would prevent spiritual growth. Man wants to walk by sight, but God has decreed that we have to walk by faith. 2 Corinthians 5:4. We should be able to comprehend the Almighty without images or idols. This principle has also been repeated in the New Testament. Most religious people abide by it. John said, "Little children, keep yourselves from idols." 1 John chapter 5, verse 21. Some, however, still cling to the practice of bowing before images. It is interesting to note that some religious peoples, to countenance their image veneration, have completely left out the second commandment from their list of the 10 commandments. And they've divided the 10th commandment into 2 to retain the original number. The next time you see a copy of the 10 Commandments, you may want to check to see whether the commandment about graven images is there. Well, this second commandment also is one that has value for us today, not because it was a part of the 10 Commandments, but because it in principle is found in the New Testament. Commandment number 3, "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." Our names are important to us, and God's name is important to Him. To take in vain meant to use lightly in an irreverent manner. 2 ways the Jews could use God's name lightly would be through false oaths and swearing. It should be noted in passing, however, that this did not exclude civil oaths, as we see in Nehemiah 5:12 and Numbers 5:19. Today, our attitude toward the name of God must remain the same. Jesus taught the disciples to pray, "Hallowed," or "Holy is thy name," Matthew 6 and verse 9. There are many ways that we can use God's name lightly or in vain today. Some of these ways are swearing in profanity, to use for selfish purposes. Some put on quite a show of religion, using God's name freely for personal gain. And thirdly, through the use of what we call bywords. If you check an unabridged dictionary, you may be surprised that common words such as gosh and golly are really just euphemisms for the name of God. And when we use such, are we not using God's name in a light and thoughtless manner? In Ephesians, the 4th chapter, verse 28 and 29, Paul gives general instructions to all Christians. Now in verse 29 he says, "Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers." Well, this commandment to not take God's name in vain is tied in with our basic attitude toward God. It has real value for us today, not because it's a part of the 10 Commandments, but because it is in principle repeated in the New Testament of Christ. The 4th commandment was, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy." If you will read the 4th command, you'll notice that the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord, or the day corresponding to our Saturday. The word Sabbath means rest, and thus they were instructed to do absolutely no work at all on that day. In their relationship with God, they were to completely set aside this day to the worship of Him. Now, as we turn to the New Testament, we find no instructions at all for Christians, for the early church, to keep the Sabbath. Earlier, we referred to Colossians, the 2nd chapter, verse 14, which refers to the fact that the old law was nailed to the cross. Notice how verse 14 in Colossians 2 reads, "Blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to His cross." Now there were some handwriting of ordinances, and these were nailed to the cross. Now notice Paul's conclusion, same chapter, verse 16. "Let no man therefore judge you or condemn you in meat or in drink, or in respect of an holy day or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath days." In those days, there were Judaizing teachers. They were going around saying, you need to keep the old law. You need to be circumcised. You need to keep various and sundry instructions found in the old law. But Paul says, no, that's not the case. Notice those last words there in that text, "or of the Sabbath days." Paul says no man can condemn you for not keeping the Sabbath or these other Old Testament laws. Why? Because according to verse 14, those old laws were all nailed to the cross. Now, you remember that we said earlier that 9 of the 10 Commandments was repeated in the New Testament, while 1 was not. This is that one. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. It is never found in the New Testament of Christ, never applied to Christians in the 1st century. In the New Testament, we're commanded to keep not the 7th day, but the first day of the week as that special day of worship. Now this is the day on which Jesus Christ arose from the grave. This is the day on which disciples met to partake of the Lord's Supper, to break bread. Acts the 20th chapter, verse 7. This is the day they met to worship God regularly. 1 Corinthians the 16th chapter, verse 1 and 2. And yes, it's that day referred to as the Lord's Day in Revelation the 1st chapter and verse 10. You know, if we follow the example of Christ, the teaching of the New Testament, that first day of the week is not going to be a day of rest as much as it's a day of worship, a day of service, a day dedicated to Him. The Sabbath, the ultimate rest for Christians is in that upper and better kingdom where we can rest from our labors from henceforth. Revelation 14:13, Hebrews the 4th chapter. In this world there's no such thing as the Christian Sabbath. In 2 Timothy 1, verse 13, Paul said, "Hold fast the form of sound words which thou hast heard in me, and faith and love which is in Christ Jesus." We're to hold to the pattern of biblical words. Let's not be guilty of calling the first day of the week the Sabbath. The fourth commandment was not repeated in the New Testament. Now, possibly now you're beginning to understand what I meant when I said that one could keep the 10 Commandments perfectly and not be saved. In the first place, the 10 Commandments are such or as part of a fulfilled agreement, are not the standard for us to follow today. In the second place, if one kept the 10 Commandments perfectly, it observed Saturday as a special day of worship instead of the first day, which is contrary to God's will for today. But thirdly, and most importantly, the 10 Commandments are as silent as the tomb about the subject of salvation anyway. I hope you've been impressed with the fact that, as Paul said, the old law reveals sin, Romans 7. The 10 Commandments revealed men as sinners, but did not show them how to get rid of that sin. The only way that we can get rid of sin today is through the blood of Jesus Christ. We must love Christ. We have to do His will. Of course, we're going to be continuing this on next week, and we hope that you'll be with us as we notice Commandments 5 through 10. We'll see you at that time.
Thank you, David, for that wonderful message. Let's listen to another song by the Fort Worth Christian Chorus. Then I'll be back to tell you how you can receive your free study booklet on the home.
Sing to the Lord in joyful strain. Let earth His praise resound. Ye who amidst the ocean dwell the isles, and fill the isles around. Sing to the Lord in joyful strain. Let earth His praise resound. Ye who amidst the ocean dwell, and fill the isles, and fill the isles around. Thou city of the Lord, we begin thy universal song. Let all combine with one accord, the cheerful notes prolong. Let all combine with one accord, the cheerful notes prolong.
Do you have your pencil and paper ready? As I mentioned earlier in the show, we've scheduled a special series on the home. This special series, entitled The Home as God Would Have It, will be presented by Robert Bankus, who preaches for the Brentwood Church of Christ in Fort Worth. The series will begin on May 13 and will be continued on the following 2 Sundays. In connection with this 3-week special, we want to offer you a free booklet that goes right along with the TV messages. You'll want to order this free booklet so you can do some extra study on this vital subject, and then you'll have the booklet to follow along during the messages. Don't delay, though. There's a limited supply of these booklets, and the series begins in only 4 weeks. We want you to have your booklet in plenty of time to begin your study. Now, here's how to get your copy. Simply write to us at The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas, 76053, and ask for the booklet on the home. That address again is The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. We'll give you our address again at the end of the program. And now here's David Roper again to tell you about another special offer.
Would you like to know more about the greatest book for all ages? Would you like to have your life enriched by learning more about this book, how it offers you a better life? I want to give you a special opportunity to study the Holy Bible in the privacy of your home with the aid of a special film strip series. This free Christian service, offered by those who love God and wish to share this love with all people, makes the Bible message come alive for contemporary man. It's a new and complete Bible survey presented with famous master paintings in gorgeous color. Thousands of all faiths have viewed these 5 exciting sound film strips shown as a free public service. Beginning with the story of creation, the first lesson presents the stirring adventures of God's dealing with early mankind. The second lesson gives a dramatic presentation of the Mosaic Law period, which ended with Christ's death on the cross. The third film strip lesson portrays the glorious resurrection and the Christian age. God lives in man and his great spiritual body, the church. The story of salvation is presented precisely as recorded in the Bible. God's eternal love and mercy are dramatically portrayed in the fourth lesson. The final lesson in this series gives an informative study of the apostolic church through the ages. This film strip is most important concerning a study of Christ's church. Through this study you can see the greatest book of the ages spring to life before your eyes. Don't miss this valuable opportunity. Simply call 817-282-6526 and ask for an appointment to see this panoramic view of the whole Bible. That number again is 817-282-6526. Or you may write to me, David Roper, at Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053, and ask for the Bible films. Please be sure to include your name, address, and phone number so we can contact you. That address again is David Roper, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053.
Christ the Lord is risen today. Hallelujah. Sons of men and angels sing. Hallelujah. Raise your joys and triumphs high. Hallelujah. Sing ye those now earth reply. Hallelujah. Lives again our glorious King. Hallelujah. Where, O death, is now thy sting? Hallelujah. Once he died our souls to save. Hallelujah. Where's a victory boasting grave? Hallelujah.
This has been The Truth in Love, sponsored by the Churches of Christ of the North Texas area. For a copy of today's program, additional information, or Bible correspondence course at no charge to you, please write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. Once again, write The Truth in Love, Post Office Box 865, Hurst, Texas 76053. We invite you to attend the Church of Christ in your area. Join us again next Sunday at the same time for The Truth in Love.